The Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Monroe document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again.
President Trump isn't denying the possibility of further American expansion, intervention, or annexation efforts in the Western Hemisphere after the military success in grabbing former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro from Caracas to face drug trafficking charges in the U.S. The reference to America's fifth president, James Monroe, and his principle of foreign policy that opposed the influence or interference of outside powers in the Americas is being used by many as a guide. Niall Ferguson writes in the Free Press that interventions in Latin America are just part of President Trump's goal. For more on this, he joins me now in Studio 57. Thank you for being here. So, Monroe aside, you say that Trump is borrowing the playbook from another American president. Who?
Theodore Roosevelt. I mean, you have to really go back about 120 years to understand what President Trump's doing. And this, many people find difficult because they think of the presidents of the recent past. But Donald Trump's a very late 19th, early 20th century kind of guy. He loves tariffs. And even more important than the Monroe Doctrine is the Trump Corollary, which is a straight lift from Theodore Roosevelt's Roosevelt Corollary, which said not only did foreign powers have no right to get involved in Latin America or the Caribbean, we, the United States, reserve the right to interfere if we don't like the way those countries down there are being run. So that is a very old school, early 1900s approach to foreign policy, and we haven't seen anything like this for a long time.
How does that sit domestically?
Well, I don't know how much it really moves voters. You know, we're now getting into the second year of a second term, and typically voters by this time just want to focus on bread and butter issues. The code word these days is affordability. And it's hard for President Trump to argue that intervening in Venezuela will meaningfully affect that. That's why he's talking a lot about oil. He wants to suggest to voters this could actually bring down energy prices and therefore address the affordability issue. He also obviously talks about crime, about drugs. So he tried very hard, I noticed in his press conference back at the weekend, to make this domestically meaningful. But I suspect the voters are going to say, there goes another American president intervening in a foreign country. What is this really doing for us?
Well, particularly because he campaigned on ending forever wars and because a lot of oil experts say that it's going to take years for Americans to feel any impact of lower oil prices if, in fact, American companies do invest in the region.
Yeah.
What type of influence could this approach have on global powers, namely China?
Well, I think that's the important part. I mean, these ships that are being taken control of by the United States, one was essentially headed to Russia, the other headed to China and was actually a Chinese-operated vessel, a tanker. And Venezuela was really a place where China and Russia thought that they had a zone of influence. But what President Trump is doing is saying, no, sorry, you can't operate in South America. That's my backyard. And I think the importance lies here not so much in what it does for the price of oil. You're right, it'll take many years to sort out the utter mess that is Venezuela's energy sector. The really important thing is the signal that President Trump is sending to the authoritarian powers around the world, which is America is back, and we're back to the days of Theodore Roosevelt when the United States carried a big stick, especially in its own backyard in the Western Hemisphere.
Does that give them carte blanche to carry a big stick in turn?
Well, that is the risk. Obviously, those who worry that Xi Jinping will now say, OK, well, then Taiwan is mine. And Vladimir Putin will say, well, you see, Ukraine is my backyard. And I think that's what makes the next steps so important here. That's why it's important that President Trump is taking this action against oil cargoes destined for those countries, Russia and China, because he's got to exert pressure on those countries, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but also elsewhere, in Eastern Europe, as well as in the Far East. It would be disastrous if the United States was able to regain the initiative in Venezuela, but lose the initiative in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, as well as over Taiwan. So the next steps in this geopolitical battle, and this is very early 1900s, with the other great powers, those are the things that really will be worth watching.
Niall Ferguson, thank you for the conversation.
Thank you, Lindsay.